Welcome to Lesson 2 of Section 10 of Hope. In the last lesson, we explored God's vision for relationships and how, as people made in His image, we are designed for intimacy and oneness as the only way to meet emotional needs and grow. Unfortunately, it is for this very reason that trauma can also significantly impact the trust and safety needed for deep connection. In this lesson, we will look more closely at how trauma impacts relationships, styles, and patterns so that you can also understand how to move beyond the hurts to healthier and deeper connections. Broadly speaking, there are 4 relational positions common to how we relate to others, in healthy or unhealthy ways. These include the following that were identified by Dr. Henry Cloud. First is isolation. Isolation is when we disconnect from others literally or emotionally and hide our true selves in relationships with others. All of us need one or more people to come out of hiding with who know our souls as they are. However, when we live in isolation, we avoid honest connection by either physically distancing ourselves from others or by keeping things shallow and emotionally avoiding deeper relationships and conversations. People who live in isolation consistently detach themselves from meaningful connection with others and are, as is said, emotionally unavailable. Next, there are pseudo-connections. Pseudo-connection is when we have relationships with others, but in our relationships we only present to others what we want them to see. We relate to others through our preferred persona or role and rarely let others see behind the curtain. People with pseudo-connections can have lots of friends and active social lives while never feeling known or real, and are often secretly lonely. Next is bad connections. Bad connections can be seen in healthy and potentially toxic and codependent relationships, where people are technically real but relate to each other in dramatic, damaging, and dysfunctional ways. People struggling with bad connections may be bonded with others, but struggle with managing boundaries, emotions, and getting emotional needs met effectively. Bad connections are often rooted in pain from the past and abusive or dysfunctional relationship styles experienced in the past. Bad connections often represent struggles to both repair past pain and effectively meet current needs, while lacking the skills and boundaries needed to do it effectively. We will explore how this works in more detail as part of this section in a few moments. Finally, real connection. Real connection represents what we are all looking for and what we have been describing. Real connection is the real me honestly interacting with the real you without shame or condemnation. Real connection is being known and loved for who we are and where we are by God and others who love us enough to help us grow beyond our wounded or unhealthy parts. Real connection is having someone to dwell with us in grace and truth, as Jesus came to do with us. As described above, bad connections can be one of the more challenging struggles in relationships for those with emotional wounds from childhood, and are often rooted in protective relationship patterns developed as ways to cope and survive in difficult circumstances, or as a result of simply learning the language of bad connections in a dysfunctional environment and thinking it was normal. Protective relationship styles typically also develop out of or correspond with our basic temperaments, as we respond to shame and are generally ineffective ways of trying to get our very real basic emotional needs met, or to protect ourselves from further hurt. They can also mirror or be reinforced by our responses to trauma of fight, flight, freeze, or feign, and move from being temporary survival strategies to patterns of relating. If we are to learn healthier approaches to relationships, it is important that we know what to avoid and recognize the warning signs. When it comes to relationships, it is always easier and more natural for us to be blind to our part and blame others. This has been true since Adam tried to blame Eve for his part in eating the forbidden fruit in the garden. Jesus reminds us of how important it is to first examine ourselves for relationships to improve when he says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Brother, let me take the speck out of your eye,' when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye?" You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So let's look at some of the planks we may have to examine in our own relationship eyes and styles to improve our connections. In 1968, Dr. Stephen Karpman developed a model of unhealthy relationship patterns that serves as a helpful tool for understanding dysfunctional patterns and connections. Karpman's model describes unhealthy or dysfunctional relationship dynamics as a triangle with three positions that one can take. As seen in the image on the next page, the three corners representing an unhealthy approach or style that one may take in a relationship include the role of persecutor, rescuer, or the victim. When someone is in persecutor mode, or at that part of the triangle, they do not value the other person's views, integrity, or boundaries, and may be openly or passive-aggressively angry or aggressive, judgmental, bullying, demanding, spiteful, or scornful. When someone is in the rescuer mode or rescuer part of the triangle, they do not value other people's ability or capacity to help themselves. They may appear self-sacrificing, be overly helpful, like to be needed, prone to meddling, or giving unsolicited advice, or invasive of other people's boundaries. When someone is in the victim mode, they do not value themselves enough and defer to others. They may act manipulative, self-pitying, helpless, needy, complaining, whiny, fretful, downtrodden, or be prone to blaming others. The reality is that in every argument, this pattern can be present to some degree. For example, if you were to start an argument with me and begin telling me what was wrong with me or coming at me for some hurt you think I caused, I would likely feel attacked or persecuted in some way, and you would be on the persecutor corner of the triangle. As a result, my choices will feel limited, and my natural reaction could either be to fight back and to also start persecuting you, or to take it and feel like a victim, or maybe to feel guilty and focus on rescuing you from your hurt feelings for whatever's going on, even if I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Further, in every significant argument, if hurtful things are said, and one or both people feel persecuted, someone will walk away feeling victimized by it. Although painful, this dynamic is common and has happened to everyone at one time or another during a personal conflict. Hopefully, however, when it has, we have been able to apologize or repair the relationship afterward and go back to a more normal and healthy relationship pattern that isn't a part of the drama triangle. Having occasional conflicts where we experience some of these dynamics is unpleasant, but the bigger picture is when these ways of operating are a pattern or style in our personality or relationships. This is what bad connections are all about. So let's look a little deeper at these dynamics and what they look like for people caught in the drama triangle or stuck in its patterns. Categories of protective and problematic relationship styles. All of the styles represented in the corners of the triangle can become a pattern or conditioned response for some people, especially in response to past trauma, dysfunctional environments, significant chronic childhood stress or loss, and as a result of feeling the need to protect themselves from physical or emotional harm to cope or survive. As described in an earlier section, these situations can leave us in a state of constant emotional high alert as we seek to cope with fear, rejection, loss, or a lack of emotional safety and security. When this is the case, we often develop unhealthy patterns of coping emotionally that tend to fit our temperament and sometimes the expected role or birth order in our situation. So first, let's look at the persecutor style. People who may have a more naturally extroverted or strong-willed temperament can lean toward developing this style as it fits more naturally with their automatic coping skills under stress. Underlying losses and pain make it difficult for them to be vulnerable, and control, protection, and taking charge become the primary reaction and ongoing solution. The fight response to stress and trauma comes more easily and may also become a way of living. For people who take on the persecutor or controller stance as a pattern, the primary relational style becomes one of control. And an underlying primary core belief might be that if they do not demand to be heard or validated or have their boundaries respected, it will not happen on its own, and being taken advantage of, disrespected, or mistreated again is out of the question. They tend to assume that people cannot be trusted and being vulnerable is too risky, so they must protect, defend, and in essence, seek to make others give them what they want or need. A core belief for a persecutor-controller might sound something like this. If only people would do what I say or what I know is right and cooperate, I would be fine, and my needs would be met. Primary emotions for someone stuck in a persecutor-controller pattern are typically anger, frustration, resentment, and bitterness. They also may be sarcastic, passive-aggressive, come across as entitled, demanding, and superior in their attitude toward others, and may act as if others are just too sensitive. Overall, persecutor-controllers want to stay in a one-up position in the relationship, and as a result tend to take too much and demand too much in relationships instead of mutual serving, giving, and receiving. People who have a more sensitive or empathetic temperament may lean toward developing a rescuing style that you can see on the triangle, as it fits more naturally with their automatic coping skills under stress. Underlying losses, pain, or fear make it difficult to be vulnerable, and control, protection, and taking charge in the form of helping and trying to make others feel better can become the primary reaction and ongoing solution for them to stay safe. For people who take on the rescuer stance as a pattern, the primary relational style becomes one of caretaking and responsibility for others. An underlying primary core belief is that they must earn love and acceptance and validation in relationships, and that taking and caring for others and taking on more responsibility will result in others getting better or seeing their efforts and offering the love and support they need. Rescuing others also brings a sense of self-worth and value that eases their shame or feels like a reasonable substitute for the love they need. Chronic rescuers are sometimes also called codependent because they often enable others by doing too much for them or saving them from consequences that allows them to continue in unhealthy behavior. The other person is dependent on an addiction or some kind of problem, and in a sense, they are unknowingly supporting them as a co-partner in the process. Chronic rescuing is also sometimes described as other addiction because the rescuer finds their escape and worth in helping or caretaking for others while avoiding their own pain and problems. A core belief for rescuers might sound something like this. If only I can do enough, help enough, comply with the needs of others enough, or care for others enough, they will get better, or be healthy enough or grateful enough to give back to me, and my needs for connection and love will finally be met. Primary emotions for chronic rescuers typically include feeling overwhelmed, guilty, anxious, responsible for everything, persistent, pressure to please others, or constant fear of conflict or failure. As a result, rescuers also try to stay in a one-up position and tend to give too much in relationships instead of stating their needs, asserting truth, and engaging in relationships of mutual serving, giving, and receiving. Rescuers are often too compliant and can't say no and have difficulty setting boundaries with others. Next, people who have a more sensitive, introverted, and passive temperament might lean toward developing a victim style, as it fits more naturally with their automatic coping skills under stress. A victim style can also be learned from having experienced direct physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, and from having experienced repeated feelings of helplessness, loss of control, or oppression. Victims may be stuck in flight mode as their reaction to past trauma, dysfunction, chronic stress, or significant loss. The underlying losses, pain, or fear make it difficult to be vulnerable and ask for help or for needs to be met. Staying safe for people stuck in the victim mode means avoiding the risks of asking, trying to be good, or letting others come to you out of sympathy or concern. For people who take on the victim stance as a pattern, the primary relational style becomes one of avoidance, passivity, and compliance. An underlying core belief is that they are helpless or lack power or the ability to influence change for themselves or in the world around them. In some ways, they have given up the idea of having control and often look for external solutions to solve their pain or struggle. Being or feeling like a victim can also bring its own sense of validation, sympathy from others, or attention, which can feel like the love or acceptance they are looking for. People stuck in a chronic victim stance are often stuck in their own internal pattern of self-defeating shame and want others to take initiative to support them, care for them, and help them without asking directly. As a result, people stuck in a chronic victim stance can be passive-aggressive or manipulative and leave others feeling easily sorry for them or guilt-tripped by their behavior. People stuck in a victim stance may also be more prone to addiction and using external things to medicate their shame and pain. Because people stuck in the victim stance feel helpless and pessimistic, drinking, drugs, sex, serial relationships, and other external fixes to their bodies or lives are often seen as an easier way to solve the pain. Core beliefs for people stuck in the victim stance might sound something like, if only others would rescue me, take care of me, read my mind, and give me what I need, or if only external things would change for me or my circumstances, then my needs for connection, acceptance, and love would finally be met. Others should do what is needed for me to feel better or have what I need. Or, since I can't do it on my own, what's the point in trying? And if others can't or won't meet my needs or help my pain, I can at least medicate it through some other means. Primary emotions for people stuck in a victim stance typically include feeling overwhelmed, depressed, helpless, hopeless, anxious, self-pity, or angry that others are not doing for them enough or helping them as they should. As a result, people stuck in the victim stance perpetually see themselves as being in the one down and disempowered position and tend to give too little, assert too little, and take too little responsibility for themselves in life and relationships. Instead of stating their needs, asking for what they want, or actively contributing to the needs of others, they wait for others to do things or life to change for them. Although not on the drama triangle, another ongoing protective stance people can take in response to family dysfunction, past trauma, or significant losses is to disconnect and avoid engaging at all. In some ways, disconnectors have decided to avoid the drama triangle altogether and to some degree just take their toys and leave. Similar to those taking a chronic victim stance, disconnectors have given up on the idea that their needs can get met. But instead of staying involved emotionally in some way, they emotionally disconnect, concluding that it is not worth it to try, either actively or passively. From a trauma perspective, the disconnector might be stuck in freeze mode, and like the proverbial deer in the headlights, simply does not know what to do or how to respond to others or their own needs, and so it's easier to do nothing. Like the other styles, underlying losses, pain, or fear make it difficult to be vulnerable and ask for help or for needs to be met. The best option for staying safe is keeping quiet, avoiding conflict in relationships, or going unnoticed as much as possible. For people who take a disconnector stance as a pattern, the primary relationship style becomes one of avoidance, detachment, numbness, and lack of communication. An underlying primary core belief is that there is no use or point to engaging because it won't change anything or anyone. Although similar to the victim, disconnectors are more emotionally shut down. They don't feel much, don't want to feel much, and don't want to care. Leave me alone is often the message, either verbally or non-verbally. Disconnectors are more often loners and keep relationships shallow so as not to let others too close or need others too much. Disconnectors' primary core belief is that staying guarded and cut off from emotions is the best way to stay safe and to not get hurt. Disconnectors may also be more prone to drinking, drugs, sex, serial relationships to avoid feeling altogether. Core beliefs for people stuck in a disconnector stance might sound something like, if only others would leave me alone, I would be okay. There is no point in having needs or feelings because people can't help you and are too caught up in themselves to care or help. It's better to stay guarded, avoid stress and emotional needs at all costs, and to stay numb and disconnected so there's no possibility of getting hurt. Primary emotions for people stuck in the disconnector stance typically include numbness, apathy, and lack of emotion. When emotional conversations do arise, they may leave, shut down, or simply not answer or respond. As a result, people stuck in the disconnector stance perpetually see themselves as needing to stay emotionally distant and therefore both give and receive too little in relationships. Disconnectors avoid meaningful, intimate, and close relationships with others, and in their avoidance set boundaries against receiving the care of others. Similar to the drama triangle and the protective patterns each can represent, research on alcoholic and other dysfunctional families show that these environments of ongoing stress or trauma also tend to result in predictable relationship coping styles and roles for family members. As we have explored in this course, any family where there are chronic and unresolved problems, whether due to abuse, illness, marital conflict, divorce, or addiction, are where family members and especially children can feel trapped in situations where safety, security, stability, and getting emotional needs met in healthy ways becomes challenging or impossible. As a result, emotional protection becomes a priority, and ways of managing one's own emotional and relational needs are limited. As you consider both the drama triangle and these additional historically identified roles for those in dysfunctional families, consider the connections you can make to their similarities in responding to pain, loss, and fear, and a lack of safety and security in getting one's emotional needs met. Where do you see yourself in having developed protective patterns in your relationship style based on your own history? The first classic role in an unhealthy or dysfunctional family is the addict. The addict is, of course, someone who is exhibiting a compulsive, chronic, physiological, or psychological need for a habit-forming substance, behavior, or activity. Addicts can function and fulfill their responsibilities in life to varying degrees, depending on the kind and level of addiction that they may have, which can include more than one addiction. For most, addiction progresses as the quantity and frequency of their use for whatever it is increases. The person's addiction becomes the primary way the addict copes with problems and uncomfortable feelings and pain. Over time, addicts tend to burn relational bridges and become isolated. Their lives revolve around their addiction and unwillingness to get the help they need. They blame others for their problems and can be angry, critical, unpredictable, and don't seem to care about how their actions or moods affects others. The enabler or caretaker role in a dysfunctional family is the person who tries to reduce harm and danger of the addiction or whatever the ongoing unresolved problem is that is not being addressed in the family through enabling behaviors such as making excuses or doing things for the addict or to cover up the problem. The enabler may deny that alcohol, drugs, or other issues are a problem. The enabler tries to control things and hold the family together through denial and avoidance of facing problems for what they really are. The enabler may go to extremes to ensure that family secrets are kept and that the rest of the world views them as a happy, well-functioning family. The enabler can be an addict's spouse, but it can also be a child or other family member who is trying to keep things feeling safe and normal in the midst of the ongoing and unresolved problem. The next role in a dysfunctional family dynamic is the hero, or the overachiever, perfectionistic, and extremely responsible person. This child looks like she has it all together and tries to bring esteem to the family through achieving and external validation. She's hardworking, serious, and wants to feel in control and rise above the situation. Heroes put a lot of pressure on themselves and can feel highly stressed and are often workaholics with what we think of as type A personalities. Next is the scapegoat. The family scapegoat role in a dysfunctional family is blamed for all of the family problems. A scapegoat child acts out in one or more ways and temporarily distracts attention away from the ongoing unresolved problems of the addict or problem person or issue in the family. The scapegoat often feels rejected and that he or she doesn't fit in well with the family. The scapegoat is seen as the rebel and becomes the focus for their acting out instead of the ongoing unresolved problems that already existed in the family. Next is the mascot or clown. The mascot in a dysfunctional or unhealthy family system is the child who tries to reduce the ongoing family stress through humor, goofing around, or getting into trouble. This child is often seen as immature or the family or class clown. Humor is often this person's go-to against feeling pain and fear and keeps things light to help everybody feel better, even though the real problems are not really being addressed. Finally, there's the lost child. The lost child is the person who largely feels invisible in the family. He or she doesn't get or seek attention and tends to be quiet, isolated, and spend most of his or her time in solitary activities, such as TV, internet, reading books, and things like that, and may escape into a fantasy world. He or she copes by essentially flying under the radar. As you can see, adopting these roles in an unhealthy and dysfunctional family are both self-protective and often connected to one's basic temperament and a position in the family. People don't get up one morning and choose these roles, but predictably adopt them as they seek to cope with difficult problems and situations that are not being honestly addressed and resolved. As we heal from past hurts, traumas, and pain, however, it is vital to begin to move past these protective patterns and roles to improve our emotional and mental health and relationships in the present. Continuing in our protective patterns can keep us stuck emotionally and relationally in ways that continue to feed or add to our emotional pain. So as we shift in the next lesson to describing important components of healthy relationships, let's briefly review one final perspective on the drama triangle and what the corners represent and the problems they bring when they become our protective patterns. Dr. Sandra Wilson explains that each corner of the triangle also speaks to one's approach to the respect we have for others and the responsibility we take for ourselves. This is a helpful view to consider when thinking about our tendency to get stuck in the drama triangle and for recognizing that appropriate respect and responsibility are the essential foundations of healthy relationships. For example, persecutors, whom Dr. Wilson also describes as users or abusers, are low in responsibility, or under-responsible, for themselves and their own behavior, and low in respect for others. They have low responsibility and low respect. Rescuers, in comparison, are high in responsibility, typically meaning over-responsible, but actually low in respect for others as they rescue them and rob them of their own responsibility. So rescuers tend to be high in responsibility, but low in respect. And finally, victims, whom she describes as volunteer victims, show over-respect for others by tending to look to others to be responsible for the solution to their problems, and low in responsibility for themselves in owning and taking care of their own problems. So they have high respect for others, but low responsibility for themselves. Wilson also offers a more biblically balanced view of respect and responsibility, which she calls one anothering, which she describes as you're worth respecting and being responsible for yourself, and so am I. This demonstrates the goal of healthy relationships, which is high respect for self and others, and high responsibility for self and to others. This overview helps begin to paint the broader picture of the important components of healthier relationships that are needed if we are to escape the perpetual pain of the drama triangle and dysfunctional roles and dynamics we may have adopted in response to our past hurts or circumstances. So next, we will identify what healthy relationships require and begin by exploring the purpose and importance of boundaries in getting us there. I'll see you in the next lesson.